And there is another issue that's raising concerns about those Olympics: doping. The World Anti-Doping Agency had scathing remarks about Russia's efforts to clean up its system at a meeting today in Montreal. They were also forced to comment on a new report that claims that half of Russia's medal winners in Sochi were taking performance-enhancing drugs. Susanna De Silva joins us now with a story that has to be disheartening for athletes and filled with espionage.
Yeah, it's really, some parts of it sound like an old-time war novel, some sort of spy novel that you would see. But the allegations have come out in the New York Times and revolve around this man, Grigory Rodchenkov. He was head of the anti-doping lab in Sochi. Now, he was pointed out in a report by WADA in the fall related to athletics, specifically that found state-run corruption and doping. He was forced to resign, fled Russia fearing for his life, went to Los Angeles, appears to be speaking to the paper and providing great detail about this doping scheme. Keep in mind, Russia, of course, under great pressure coming into those games. They'd spent billions of dollars, had done very poorly in Vancouver, and so this scheme began. Now, according to Rodchenkov, he had a cocktail of 3 drugs he would give to athletes: and alcohol, whiskey for the men, vermouth for the women. That even before the games, a member of Russia's security service came, seized a number of the containers they use for urine samples that are supposed to be tamper-proof, and worked on them until they were able to find a way to open them without making it look like they had actually been opened. Then during the games, the athletes who'd won medals, when they were giving samples, would take photos of the bottles because they're not supposed to have their names on it, just numbers, send that to the Russian officials, who then knew whose samples they needed to pull that night. That they set up a lab using a single lamp in a storage room next to the main lab, would pass samples back and forth through a hole cut in the wall, switch the samples for clean ones, and he says that 15 of Russia's 33 medal-winning athletes were involved in the scheme.
Contrast those allegations with everything the Olympics are supposed to be about and all the celebration that was going on in Sochi. What's WADA saying about all of this?
Well, already this week, WADA had to respond, saying they would investigate after allegations came out on 60 Minutes on the weekend. They say today they are going to investigate these latest allegations. They also had scathing comments for Russia themselves, that in light of the oversight that came forward after that report in the fall, that Russian officials are not cooperating. They're having trouble getting access to the Russian athletes. There are only 10 people in the entire country that are doing testing at this point, and they're simply not cooperating with the investigation. They say they only have one investigator in Lausanne. They are working on hiring a new chief investigator, opening a new lab, and are doing what they can to make athletes feel confident.
Anything else that happened in previous years, I cannot give that assurance. But I hope the athletes would believe that we have learned from this situation and that we do everything that we can, looking forward, that games will be run in the very best possible way.
But Canadian Becky Scott, who chairs WADA's athlete committee, says at this point athletes are not feeling confident going into Rio's games.
We would like to see WADA taking the lead and building a robust investigative team that is going out and actually uncovering, these infractions, and rather than following up on TV programs and reports that are in the media, it should be WADA leading this.
Russia, of course, calling all of these allegations absurd.
And just quickly before we go, tell us about Kenya.
Kenya as well has now been found to be in non-compliance by WADA, which means they could also miss the Rio Games. They were supposed to pass legislation in Parliament to bring themselves up to standards. That legislation was not passed the way they wanted, and they are now also in non-compliance.
Thanks, Susanna. Thanks.